Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Ol'SargeCollects. This is going to be episode 4 of the Diamond Star set. And last episode, we covered Dixie Walker. And we covered George Blayholder, Van Mungo. And we finished up with Shanty Hogan. So we have an interesting lineup for this episode, and none of these players are Hall of Famers, but some of them have some pretty interesting stories. So the first card I'm going to show is card number 21, Johnny Vergez. And Johnny Vergez was born in 1906 in Oakland, California. He made his major league debut in 1931 as a third baseman for the New York Giants. And he played 3 seasons for the Giants, and then he was traded to the Phillies, and he played the 1935 and half of the 1936 seasons with the Phillies. And then he finished out the 1936 season with the St. Louis Cardinals. And this card, I believe, is 1934. So he was still with the Giants on this card. And then what else here? So tragically, Johnny Vergez's son died during the 1932 season, and after his death, Johnny wasn't really the same player. So he then suffered from different injuries, which caused an early end to his major league career. After the 1936 season, Johnny was sent back down to the minors, where he played until 1943. He then died in 1991 at the age of 85 in Oroville, California. So this is an interesting card. I do like this card mostly because of his facial expression. He looks like he's really enjoying the game. I also like the background. I think you can kind of make out the grandstands in the background, and then you have a player over here over his left shoulder. So I like the way his cap is tipped up on his head. On the back of the card, this card is from 1934. It's a greenback, and the tip is about running the bases. It's about the hook slide, and so that is Johnny Vergez. All right, next player is going to be Jimmy Wilson. Out of all of these players, Jimmy Wilson has the most interesting career. So Jimmy Wilson was born in 1900 in Philadelphia, PA. He made his major league debut in 1923 as a catcher for the Phillies. And then from 1919 to 1923, Jimmy was a dual athlete. He played semi-pro soccer and minor league baseball. And then in 1923, he was called up to the Philadelphia Phillies, which ended his soccer career. Jimmy played with the Phillies from 1923 to 1928 before being traded to the St. Louis Cardinals. And in 1928, Wilson joined baseball history when he was traded by the Phillies to the Cardinals during a game between the two clubs. So supposedly he played the first 2 innings with the Phillies and then went into the Cardinals locker room and suited up to finish the game with St. Louis. Then in 1931, Jimmy and the Cardinals won the World Series. In 1933, Jimmy was the starting catcher for the National League in baseball's first official All-Star game. So Jimmy was part of the Gas House gang of the 1930s with the Cardinals. In 1934, Jimmy was traded back to the Phillies and played 4 seasons as a player-manager. In 1935, he was elected to play again in the All-Star game. In 1938, after having no luck as a player-manager, Jimmy was traded to Cincinnati and played with the Reds until the end of the 1940 season, which was also his last year playing professional baseball. He ended his playing career winning the World Series with the Reds. Another interesting highlight for Jimmy Wilson is that as a player, he once had to umpire a game. So This happened in 1940, and it was a game between Cincinnati and St. Louis Cardinals. He was playing with Cincinnati, and then on this particular game, there were no umpires that had been assigned by the National League. One umpire who lived in Cincinnati was summoned to the game as head umpire, while Jimmy and another player on the Cardinals umpired the first and third bases. In 1941, he was selected to coach the Chicago Cubs and did so until 1944, before taking over the Reds as coach until 1946, where he was released for having too many losing seasons. So he wasn't a very successful coach. And Jimmy Wilson died at the age of 46 in Florida. I believe he suffered a heart attack, which was the cause of his death. And another side note, so his son in 1944 also died of a tragic plane accident. His son was in the military and died of a tragic plane accident. So, all right, the next player is Bill Hallahan. This is card number 23. And Bill was born in 1902 in Binghamton, New York. He made his major league debut in 1925 as a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. So Bill was a key member of the famous Gas House Gang and pitched in all three of the World Series championships, and those were 1926, 1931, and 1934. He was the 1930 National League strikeout leader, and in 1931 he was the National League wins leader and strikeout leader. In 1933, he was selected to be the National League starting pitcher for baseball's first official All-Star game. Same thing with Jimmy Wilson back there. In 1936, he was traded to the Cincinnati Reds, and his stats started to decline. And in 1938, he was traded again to the Phillies and retired after one season with Philadelphia. He lived to be 78 years old and died in 1981 in his hometown of Binghamton, New York. Still can't pronounce that right. And with these last two cards, I failed to mention the back of this card for Jimmy Wilson the fielding tip. It talks about the catcher's hands and basically how to position the hands within the catcher's mitt. And then for Bill Hallahan, it's also greenback from 1934. It talks about positioning your feet on the rubber on the pitcher's mound. So that's a little bit about the backs of those cards. Now, as far as what I like and about each card, I would have to say that for Jimmy Wilson, the main thing I really like about his card is the catcher stance that he's in, and I like the detail of the catcher's mitt. I don't know how well you saw that before, but this catcher's mitt has some shine to it. I kind of like that. And I also like the contrast of colors in the background. So that's what I like about that card. I can't really say there's a whole lot I care for about the Bill Hallahan card. I guess the different contrast in colors, but I mean that kind of goes for all of these Diamond Stars cards. They're just really wonderful with the contrasted colors in that Art Deco design. So it fits nicely within all that. All right, last player is Earl Sparky Adams. And Sparky Adams was born in 1894 in Zerb Township, Pennsylvania. He made his major league debut in 1922 as a shortstop for the Chicago Cubs. Sparky, at 5 foot 4.5 inches, was the shortest major league player during his career. He played for the Chicago Cubs for 5 seasons, and in 1928 he was traded to the Pirates and played with them for 2 seasons. In 1930 he was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals and was a World Series champion with the famous Gas House Gang. In 1933, Sparky was traded to the Cincinnati Reds and retired at the end of the 35 season. Sparky Adams died in 1989 at the age of 94. He was the last living player of the St. Louis Cardinals in the 1931 World Series. So this is my favorite card in this group. And what I really like about this card is the pinstripes on the uniform, and flanked by the Art Deco design of the building in the background and the grandstands. And then I like the player in the background who's fielding. So that's what I really like about this. This card is from 1934 also. So I believe all of these cards are from 1934. And the fielding tips for this is how to play ground balls. And another interesting fact is these last three players that I covered were all in the 1931 World Series, part of the St. Louis Cardinals team. Anyway, so that's all I have for you this week, and catch the next episode next week. And until then, y'all take care.